It's an afternoon meeting. Y'all better watch out. I don't have to wake up halfway into the meeting this time.
All right, thank you very much. We're calling our meeting to order. And we're going to start here with Metro Fair Board. We have an appeal announcement we need to start with. And this is a joint meeting of the TSFA and the Metro Fair Board. Any person aggrieved by any action of our board may appeal the decision to the board by writ of cert to the Chancery Court. You are advised to seek your own independent legal counsel and to see that all procedural requirements have been met. I'm Ned Horton. I'm chairman of the Metro Fair Board. We have with us TSFA board as well, and Mr. Rose is chair of that board. Our meeting has been called to order. I don't know if you want to call yours to order as well.
Yes, I call our meeting to order, and we have a quorum present. Just for everyone's information, we have 12 voting board members and a total of 16 members, so a quorum for our board is 7, and we have that quorum. We do have 3 of our members who are participating by telephone conference, and that is permissible under our bylaws. And so I declare a quorum and declare the meeting called to order. And do you want to do introductions on your side first, or would you like us to?
Well, we have Charles Sewing, who's the vice chair of our board, John Ray Clemens as well, E.L. Ray, and Mr. Kenneth Bird. That's our board of 5.
Okay. And if it's all right, Ned, and you may want to let your board do this, I'm going to let mine introduce themselves so that I don't miss anyone or mess anything up. So we'll start over here with Representative Andy Holt, if you tell us who you are.
I'm Andy Holt, serving currently with the Tennessee General Assembly, House District 76. I'm a full-time farmer and a part-time legislator, hailing from Weakley County, specifically Dresden, Tennessee.
I'm Deborah Varallo with Varallo Public Relations. I have a marketing and public relations firm, and we also assist with events.
I'm Will Cheek. I'm an attorney. And I'm late. I got lost.
We all got lost.
My name is Joe Gaines, and I represent the Tennessee Department of Agriculture.
My name is Julie Bowling. I represent the Tennessee Farm Bureau Federation on the board.
And I guess I've already introduced myself, but I'm John Rose, and I'm a businessman here in Nashville and a farmer over in DeKalb County, and serve on the TSFA board. If the 3 on the phone could introduce themselves, we'll let you introduce yourselves.
I'm Emily Petcock. I am Vice Chairman of the Board. I am Executive Secretary of the Tennessee Association of Fairs. And I reside in Fayetteville, Tennessee.
Christy, go ahead.
Christy Fortner, former Metro employee, former volunteer for the TSFA, and current board member. I'm in Davidson County.
I'm Bill Mullins. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and currently am in Maine.
And I think to facilitate our discussions, it might be good if our staffs introduce themselves. So, Christy, I'll let you all start and just go down the line there.
Christy Harris. I'm assistant to Buck Dozier at the Tennessee State Fairgrounds.
Steve Burton. I'm director of events at the Fairgrounds.
Buck Dozier, executive director of the Fairgrounds. Ken Sanders, assistant.
Scott Jones, Tennessee State Fair Association Fair Manager.
I'm Charles Curtis on the technical committee for the State Fair, livestock exhibitor.
Lynn Williams, a fair administrator, Tennessee Department of Agriculture, and also on the TSFA secretary and the technical committee.
I'm Phyllis Ellis. I'm the independent vendor coordinator for the TSFA.
Carrie Ann Fuller, working on sponsorships for TSFA.
Ellen Nelson, working on PR for TSFA.
Kinsey Emery, TSFA Marketing and Event Manager.
Ann Hollingsworth, I'm the office manager and the data entry for the Tennessee State Fair Association.
Sandra Carroll,
I am the equine department head for the Tennessee State Fair Association.
Kim Caulfield. I run the fleece show for the Tennessee State Fair Association.
Vanessa Ward, livestock superintendent, livestock superintendent for the TSFA.
And without objection from our board, I'm going to turn the chair for our meeting over to Joe McCord, who is the chief clerk of the Tennessee House of Representatives, who we're going to allow to moderate the meeting from our side. And Ned, I guess you need to do the same.
Yeah, we've agreed, Mr. McCord would moderate the meeting, this joint meeting of our two boards.
Thank you. I'm Joe McCord, as stated, Chief Clerk of the House Representative. I have a great affinity for the process and procedure. I was a House member for 12 years. I understand contentious issues as this is. The beauty of me is I have not an ounce of passion on this issue. I'm the only person in this room that can say that, and I do want to try to be fair and allow y'all to have as great a discussion as you can. I work for the House of Representatives at the behest of Speaker Hallwell, who is in Davidson County, and would love y'all to have wonderful success in moving this along so we don't all have to continue this contentiousness. Without objection, we have an agenda both groups have agreed to, and what we would like to do, my main role here, as I see it, is simply not to have an opinion, but to maintain civility and discussion and flow of discussion. With that in mind, I would like for each person to raise your hand. I'll put you on the list, and when the time comes up to receive, discretion of the chair before you carry on with discussion to prevent running debate. Running debate does not seem to accomplish very much. People are too busy talking to be able to hear what others are saying. As we go through the presentations, if you will just raise your hand, and I will get you on the list, and we will proceed through the list at your discretion. When we're in presentations, unless it's a clarification of a fact that you want to get at that particular point in time, let me know. We'll interrupt who is giving the presentation, get that clarified, but try to hold questions until the end. That seems to be a much more efficient way of moving along, and then we'll process through the list for questions. Are there any questions about the procedure? As I understand it, until we get toward the end of the agenda, there will not be motions made or entertained. That's not the goal today. The goal is for informative purposes and that reason only. So if no one has any objection or questions, then I guess we would go right on to the next agenda item, Tennessee State Fair status presentation. Oh, and if you don't mind, I did forget to say one thing. The thought would be to have the represented people here, the board members of both bodies, to ask questions. Obviously, it will be turned over to staff and legal and different groups as I hear if you would like to yield to anybody. But the desire is to have this group come together and ask the questions and process from that way outward. Without objection, Mr. Gaines from Tennessee State, and please, when you are recognized, please state your name and your office or affiliation for the record, please.
My name is Joe Gaines. I retired from the Tennessee Department of Agriculture a few months ago. I've been actively involved with the State Fair and the State Fair Association for many years. I was asked to come back and support the work of the State Fair and the State Fair Association for the time being. I'm assisted by Kenzie Emery, who's going to operate our machine here today. We had a meeting about 2 weeks ago, and during part of it, I stepped outside to go to the men's room. When I came back, I found out that I had been elected to give a presentation at this joint meeting today.
I nominated you.
But I am pleased to do that. And I'm also pleased to be here talking about the Tennessee State Fair, the things that are going on there. It's working. Okay. Our theme this year is Come Grow With Us. I'm going to return to that theme in just a few moments. Certainly to this group, I don't need to talk much about the history of the state fair. Really, the first state fair was held in North Nashville in 1855. The Tennessee Department of Agriculture was formed in 1854, and it was formed with the primary purpose of sponsoring and facilitating fairs across the state of Tennessee. Fairs were then, as they are now, a showcase for technology, for exchange for information, for an opportunity for people to come together and have an enjoyable event. This fair has been in various locations over the years, but it's been at the current location for this will be the 107th edition of the state fair at the current fairgrounds. Certainly, racing has been important at the fairgrounds for many of these years, of interest to many citizens. Also, the racing tradition is a historical tradition in itself. Business interest and agricultural interest have always been involved with the fair, and were certainly for reasons for its first initiation. Wrong way. There were, in 2009, Metro government decided not to operate the fair anymore, that it was not going to be operated by Metro government. At that time, that was kind of a catalyst event that brought together the interest of many different individuals, agencies, and organizations. It was at that time that the Department of Agriculture, the State Department of Tourist Development, Tennessee Farm Bureau Federation, the University of Tennessee, and other groups came together to look at a way to support and continue this tradition that's been so important to so many citizens of our state. A board was established that contains a wide diversity of people from all across the state, a variety of different interests, agriculture, business, public institutions, political leadership of our state, just a variety of different folks. In addition to the board itself, there are several ex officio officers. And the technical committee, and I like to think the technical committee are the heavy lifters. They're the ones who do the work of the state fair, making sure that things happen in order for that period between September 6th and the 17th to come off without a hitch and to do so much work. Again, we have a wide variety of individuals and organizations represented. Our goal is to have a true statewide fair. A fair from the Mississippi River to the Appalachian Mountains, with participation by citizens, by counties, by groups from all across the state of Tennessee. Even back in the heyday of the Tennessee State Fair, it was basically a Middle Tennessee fair. We would like to take that tradition and spread it on out all across our state. All of these words describe a state fair. A state fair has so much to offer. It offers it in an atmosphere of fun, safety, and enjoyment. All of these things take place in a state fair. I can't say enough about volunteers. Volunteers are the heart and soul of a fair. Paid staff's okay, we've got some good ones with TSFA, but really what makes a fair are the volunteers. We lost a lot of those with the uncertainty about the fair, but we've been able to build back. I think we're up some 16% from last year, and have around 245, 250 volunteers who actively participated in the 212 fair. But the fairs are so important, and that's one of our chief work objectives, is to continue to recruit these volunteers. Just another example of the importance of volunteers. In 2009, there were 16 quilts exhibited during the fair. Well, we were able to find a volunteer coordinator to come in and spend a lot of time, a lot of energy working on that. And in 2012, we had 75 of these beautiful quilts from all over the state that were competing for a grand prize in the state fair. Education, so important for a fair. Certainly, 4-H, FFA, Ag in the Classroom, these agricultural groups that teach skills important to farm production. They teach integrity, honesty, competition, just wonderful competitive events and educational events for youth in our state. But it's not just these ag-based youth groups that come. We're going to have an elementary school day, I think the Monday, Scott, of the fair, and young kids will come in. They'll see all sorts of science, recycling, agriculture, all sorts of interesting things at the Tennessee State Fair. I'm not supposed to use the word seniors, but since I fit that category, I'm going to say that we are having a day for folks that are my age and above on Tuesday of the fair, and there will be educational and entertainment activities planned for those folks also. Tourism. I don't have the statistics to support it, but I know the State Fair is in the top 10 events in Nashville if you look at attendance. We would like to grow that significantly, as some of our contemporaries in other states do. People who come, the exhibitors, the several visitors, the competitors, look for places to stay, look for places to buy food, look for places to buy gas. And they have a big economic impact on this general broader Nashville area. So tourism is a big impact of the State Fair, and it's certainly something that we're focused on to build. The Department of Tourist Development is represented on our board and provide great assistance to us. The fairgrounds, such an important, such a wonderful site. As a person who grew up in Nashville, I remember the fairgrounds and Fair Park and all those special things from years gone by. It's important to many people in the public in Nashville, Middle Tennessee, all across the state of Tennessee. It's recognized as the state fairgrounds. It has a 107-year tradition of being the fairgrounds. It has good interstate road access. It has good parking. It has facilities. I think we all know those facilities need a good bit of investment and improvement, but still they're probably the best place to have a livestock show in the state of Tennessee as far as what's out there. So it all comes together to make this the site for the Tennessee State Fair. Shifting now to some of the activities that we have planned for 2013, I'll have to say that every year builds for the next year. What we did last year should be bigger and better and more extensive than the year before. It's the way fairs work. Green collar exhibits, looking at ways, and we particularly identified this urban market that's around Nashville, ways in which we can show practical sustainability and environmental consciousness in the general area. We are partnering with the Tennessee Master Gardeners group. Their focus this year is herbs. I think I've said that right. Herbs. How to grow herbs, how to bring that into the kitchen. They have a chef that operates at a restaurant in Germantown. He's going to come in and show folks how to take those herbs and make some type of dip or spread or other dish for their kitchens. Ellen Nelson over here, our PR person, is going to publicize that to a lot of folks, and so we look forward to good attendance then. They're going to show us how to prune your fruit trees and prune your grapevines and just a whole variety of different things in that green collar. The Tennessee Ag Museum, located at Ellington Agricultural Center, traditionally counted as one of the top 10 small museums in the state of Tennessee. We'll relocate part of their exhibition over to the State Fair, and people will be able to see the Ag Museum. Tennessee State Parks will be there. Their 75th anniversary was last year. They have a partnership with Tennessee Titans aimed at youth physical fitness, and they're going to have their partners there to be able to show kids the value of physical fitness and different things. Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, not quite finished yet, but we think they're going to be there also. Nashville is culturally diverse, as we all know, and our offerings at the fair are trying to reflect this cultural diversity. One example is the Hispanic Rodeo that occurs the second weekend. A huge event, brings a lot of people in, very enjoyable. Scott says we're going to get Southern Hills Hospital as a co-sponsor of some of our events because they get so much business from some of the things that they do. Arts, again, a very important topic. Bill Mullins, a fellow who's in Maine, is the former executive director of the Tennessee Artists and Craftsmen Association, and as such is bringing that whole element into the fair. We've received a grant from the Tennessee Arts Commission, and that grant enables us to bring in demonstrators for the length of the fair. We have woodworkers, potters, and textile weavers as a part of it, and it's a hands-on thing. A kid can come in and actually turn a pot on a wheel. Music is important. We have over 50 acts scheduled, and they will be on various stages throughout the fairgrounds. Competition, I mentioned the importance of that earlier, particularly to youth and across the state, but also to adults. One of the real special things about the fair this year is Tennessee's best apple pie. We're going to have a championship for that. I hope to be a judge. Some of the various things that we have planned, I've mentioned most of these, but there's special groups, youth, seniors, others that we want to offer special activities to. We want the State Fair to be the location for the championship of champions. The winners of various shows, the best Angus bull at a county fair would come to Nashville to compete for the champion of champions. We've made progress in that area. Poultry and dairy cattle are two that are going to be offered this year, as well as quilting and the apple pie contest. There are many others that are out there we'd like to pull back in. Equine is an area I'm particularly proud of. I'm proud of Sandy over here, who's done, one of our volunteers who's done such a wonderful job at it. Last year, an old vacant lot, Scott had the vision to see, you know, we could probably put a little equine arena over there. And with the help of some of the staff at the fairgrounds, with the help from some state agencies and TSFA volunteers, they went out and created this wonderful arena. And there were so many events going on last year. It was really a high point of where we at. And well, Sandy and her folks have put together a tremendous equine agenda for this year. I believe it's in one of the packets that's going out, but it's going to be just a wonderful set of events to occur. I'd like to say that last year, 2012, was the first time they'd had a horse competition at the State Fair since 1970 when the Coliseum burned. That's it. That's a brief picture of the association and the hopes we have for the fair this year. Obviously, we need a place to have the fair. We need to get behind us whatever lease discussions we're going to have. Also, for us to achieve our vision of where we would like the State Fair to be and to go, we need some type of longer-term agreement on how, on the lease agreement for the use of the fairgrounds. We've been told by various groups that we want to pull in for the Champion of Champions competition, that, well, where are you going to be next year? We have people coming from all over the country. We need to know what's going on. They really would like a multi-year agreement on what happens. So we would like to move towards a partnership with the Fairgrounds Board to where we agree on a vision and we work jointly towards putting on the best event that we can for our citizens. So.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Gaines. I joked earlier that I did not have a passion for this, but I may have found a passion in judging the apple pie contest with you. Questions from Mr. Gaines? And are there any questions from any of the members joining us on teleconference? Okay. Well, without objection, then next we will go to the presentation of State Fair Association financials, and we'll turn it over to Chairman John Rose without objection.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. I am going to turn this portion over immediately to Charles Curtis, who you met earlier and is over here on our left, my left. And Charles is kind of pinch hitting today. Our treasurer has had double knee replacement surgery, Joe Pearson. And then tragically on Sunday, his wife fell and broke her wrist in 2 places and is having surgery as we speak. So the Pearson household has been dealing with some health issues, and Charles Curtis works closely with Joe. And Charles is going to present our recently completed audited financial statements for 2012. Kraft CPAs conducted an audit of our 2012 financial information. Each member around the table, the Metro Board of Fair Commissioners members, you should have received via FedEx a copy of our 2010 and 2011 financial statements, as well as a copy of our 2010 and 2011 tax returns. And then if you don't have that with you, we can get you another copy. And then you should also have now been given a copy of our 2012 audited financial statements, which we just received at the beginning of the week. So hopefully everyone has that. If anyone needs a copy of any of that information, please just raise your hand around the table. And without any further ado, I'll introduce...
Let me interrupt you one quick, brief moment. Again, I assume this information is new to several of y'all that are here. Please, let's try, if possible, to get through the presentation and hold the questioning for the end. But if it's clarification, if something's not made clear in the presentation, please just get my attention, and we will interrupt at that point to try to get that clarified for you.
So Mr. Curtis is going to walk you through our 2012 financial statements. And then if you would like to hear about anything else, just say, and he or someone else can help us walk through the other information, and certainly can ask questions after he's finished. Mr. Curtis.
Thank you all. It's my pleasure to be here. And of course, if you've got too many questions, we've got our accountant, Ms. Jennifer Fulbright, with us, and she's got a lot of, can help with that. But as far as our audited financial statement, you have in front of you, ending December the 31st, 2012. It's the audited statement of Tennessee State Fair Association, as so noted on page 1. On page 2, this is an opinion from the Kraft CPAs that did the audit for us. It says, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the Tennessee State Fair Association as of December 31st, 2012, and the changes in their net assets and their cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America, and that's by Kraft accounting firm. On page 3, if you'll, am I going too fast? I see a lot of papers flipping. So if I am, okay, page 3. This is a statement of our financial position. as of December the 31st, 2012 shows our total assets of $500,726. Total liabilities of $20,141, and that was paid after the first of this year. Total net assets of $480,585. On page 4 is our statement of activities, or our operating statement. Looking at our revenue first, the admission, $390,751. Commissions on fees on Midway, $361,000. Grants of $88,975. Donations and sponsorships of $69,042. Our vendor space rental, $57,137. Our contributed accounting and legal services, which nets out in expenses, that is $34,915. Our exhibitor entry fees of $16,404. Other income of $5,336 for a total revenue of $1,023,660. Our expenses, fairground rental of $67,805. Our advertising and public relations, $189,495. Our fair entertainment, $101,399. Premiums of $91,309. Our salaries, which was cleanup, crew, maintenance, ticket sellers, etc., of $96,700. Our contracted services, which was the police, the EMTs, waste, pickup and all, $78,139. Other fair expenses, this is our fuel, equipment rental, etc., of $61,896. Our management and general, which is the audit fees, depreciation, we had 2 on salary of a total of that of $94,379. And again, as I noted above, our in-kind accounting and legal expenses, which I said would net out at $34,915. Total expenses, $857,575. Our change in net assets of $166,085. The net assets at the beginning of the year was $314,500, and our net assets at the end of the year, $480,585. You know, I think our volunteers and donations is the key to our success with the fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. I'm sure there'll probably be some questions on that. Do we have any questions from Mr. Curtis or any other member regarding the... So are you jotting down? Okay. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Ray.
Thank you. As I recall in past meetings, we'd had some questions about some of the grants, and I hadn't had time to read it. I saw some information in the back here about the restricted, unrestricted. Can anybody go into that just a little bit, explain that a little bit more?
Chairman Rose, do you want to try to go into that, or do you want to let Mr. Curtis?
And the reason, excuse me, the reason we were asking about that was because of the state of our facilities. We were wondering if any of that could be used to help fix up something, and that was the discussion. But just curious about it.
Right. We have been very fortunate to receive some significant grants, I think it's safe to say, from the Tennessee Department of Agriculture and from some others. From the beginning, the department, of course, as former Commissioner Gaines explained, had a very active role in setting up the TSFA and trying to keep the fair alive, and they were very generous with some grants that they gave to the TSFA. those grants were for specific expenses. So, in other words, we used those funds to do specific things that we said we would do as a part of the grant agreement. However, all of us understood from the beginning that if we got those grants and used them for those expenses and we were able to produce a surplus in the operation of the fair, the department officials repeatedly told us they wanted to see us build our financial reserves so that we could withstand any future weather-related or other shocks that might present themselves to the fair. And because in the beginning, as you can all appreciate as business people, we had no operating capital. And so, as we approach the fair, and each year we spend our money, and then, of course, we hope to get it back as the fair occurs. So the direction that we had been continually given, both from the department and from others in the fair community, was that a comfortable reserve is equal to about 1 year of costs of operating the fair, so that you're not going to not be able to pay your suppliers, creditors. And so we understood that to be a kind of a quid pro quo, if you will, of we're going to give you these grants, but we want you to shepherd your resources carefully. And we asked for clarification on that after your January board meeting where this issue came up, and we received a letter from the commissioner indicating that he did want to see us, to the extent possible, reserve those funds, and our board voted to do that as a designation. Now, it is not a hard restriction because, as it turns out, those grant contracts do not say anything about that because, of course, we applied to spend that money and we spent that money on the expenses. So, of course, we hope that in the future they might continue to give us support in a similar way. Obviously, those grants are important to having as successful a fair as possible, and so you want to do what you think the person giving you the money wants you to do. So that was our sense. So our board has designated a total of $200,000, Commissioner Ray, as designated reserve from that equates roughly to the amounts that we received in 2011 and 2012, and which we were able to put back as reserves because of the surplus that we generated from the operation of the fair. And as I indicated to you all in the letter I sent last week, we deeply appreciate the reasonable terms upon which the fairgrounds has been leased to us in prior years that has allowed us to build some reserves so that we can prudently operate the fair. And it's taken all of those things. And I think if you look at our financial statements and reflect on what has happened over the last 3 years, what you'll see is a story of us building our capacity and obviously us building the fair as we go along. And I think we can continue to do that and hope that we get the opportunity to. I hope that answers your question.
Yes. Thank you.
Ms. Ray, do you have a follow-up, or are you comfortable?
No, that answered my question.
Mr. Byrd?
Yeah, just to, I'm looking at the numbers you gave us in 2011 as well as 2012, so I want to kind of, it says for fairgrounds rental in 2011, you paid roughly $60,000. And I'm just trying to clarify. And then in 2012, you have down for $67,000. And I just want to clarify, is that all the money that was given to the fairgrounds, or within some of those line items, was there other money that went to the fairgrounds?
No, but there, Mr. Rose, you want to answer that, or Mr. Curtis?
I can. I'm sorry.
Mr. Rose.
There is a difference between 2011 and 12, and the difference is that in 2011, the rental amount that is indicated, the $60,282, was the total proceeds that the Metro Board received for the lease of the grounds. In 2012, if you'll recall,
in 2011,
no, that's in 11. You got $60,282. In 2012, we paid you as a percentage of the ticket sales or a share of the ticket sales, $67,805. But separately, your staff operated the parking, and the proceeds from the parking net of costs was, and I don't have those numbers right in front of me, approximately $75,000, $80,000. Okay, net of 40. I guess I'm telling you what the total proceeds were. So the total, I guess, proceeds to the Metro Fair Board were $107,000, give or take, in 2012.
Okay, can I follow?
Mr. Byrd?
The expenses in 2011 for you all total $673,000, and the total expenses in 2012 jump up to $857,000. And I'm wondering what the significant increase is to run the fair.
Mr. Rose?
With just kind of speaking without looking at specifics, I can tell you that there are probably two primary drivers. Number one is that we have increasingly brought back entertainment, increased the total amount of premiums offered, and just otherwise increased the activities that are going on at the fair. And of course, in order to do that, we had staffing costs that went up as well. So in 2011, we had only staff for about the last half of the year, but in 2012, we had full-time staff for most of the year. So those are the primary reasons, those two combined.
Mr. Byrd?
Then my final sort of follow-up to all that would be, what is your expectation then on a typical annual year of cost to run the fair going forward? Is the 857 more typical, or is that going to slowly increase on a small rate?
I think that will, I'm sorry, I think that will increase as we're able to grow the attendance and as we're able to grow the footprint of the fair and add back events and shows. So, I'd like to say the sky's the limit, but my anticipation would be that you'd see that grow, in about the same way that you see attendance growing. So, as we look at thinking about 2013, obviously the rental is going to go up dramatically as we've agreed. And we hope that attendance continues to increase in the 10 to 20% range is kind of what we're anticipating and hoping for. And we are, as Commissioner Gaines recited earlier, we are adding numerous events, musical performers, extra stages, and improving the quality of those events as we go along.
Chairman Byrd, do you have?
Thank you.
Anything? Yes, sir. And now I have to ask a clarifying question first, too. Vice Chairman is suing?
Yes.
Okay. Vice Chairman suing, you're recognizing.
I just want you to repeat that 2011 expense number.
Mr. Byrd, you're asking?
The number I saw was $673,838.
I see that. I heard 67,000.
I'm sorry, yes, 673. I may have misspoke.
Right, I heard. Okay, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Further questions regarding the State Fair Association financials, questions either of Mr. Curtis or Chairman Rose? Mr. Clemens.
Yeah, my name's John Ray Clemens, for the benefit of those on the phone. I'm on the Metro Fair Board. Mr. McCord, I appreciate you doing this. I think you wrongly characterized this as a contentious issue. Both boards in this room, who are all present here today, are on the same page. We all want this fair to take place. We're all supportive of the fair and the fine folks here who put this fair on. So in that respect, this isn't a contentious issue. The issue is focused squarely on the financials. Now, it's a concern for our board because we're in a unique position, a different position than the State Fair Association. We're looking at managing a property that is aging, leads to Ms. Ray's question of, looking for grant money to improve our facility, looking for some sort of dedication, commitment from the State Fair Association to reinvest in that property to help us out. Now, we requested the financials, and I appreciate Mr. Rose for providing these. I received these last night in my office about 5 p.m. The financials that I'm looking at show revenues increasing from $48,000 to $266,000, I believe. Oh, that's expenses. Revenues from $198,000 to $940,000 and change to $1 million. So this does exactly what I was concerned about, and the reason why I raised such an issue about us getting all these financials. Because as you guys succeed, we need to succeed. Because without us, there is no state fair unless it moves somewhere else, which we don't want to happen. We're all committed. I don't want to speak for the rest of our board, but we have a commitment to putting on this fair on our fairgrounds. Now, we've negotiated in good faith, and we see these financials and revenues continue to increase on your end, but we don't see the payments to us continue to increase at the same rate or even being comparable to the percentages of your revenues. Now, I understand that y'all's sole purpose as a nonprofit is to put on the fair, and we appreciate that, and we want to make that happen. But the reason for this, as you remember, was to make sure we were negotiating a contract in good faith and that we could benefit as much as possible so that the taxpayers of Tennessee, Nashville, weren't carrying an overwhelming burden for a property that we're doing our best, kind of hamstrung situation here to make work. So again, I appreciate you providing these financials. I wish I'd received them earlier, but I just want to in the future negotiate now that we have kind of this light on these numbers in a manner that benefits everyone, because we need to benefit the fairgrounds so that the fair can take place, which is the objective of everyone sitting at this table and a lot of people in this room. So, my question is, I understand that you guys want to keep some in reserve, have a rainy day fund, cover your debts. It makes total sense. But I guess what I'm looking for you guys is, why aren't our revenues to the fair lining up to some extent with the revenues that y'all are obtaining?
Mr. Rose, before you answer, that was a fair statement, Mr. Clemens. I used the wrong verbiage to say contentious, no pun intended, but to be fair. I should have said passionate and left it at that. Chairman Rose, if you would like to respond.
Yes. First of all, Mr. Clemens, Commissioner Clemens, regret deeply that you didn't receive those. Your office, I learned, recently moved, and unfortunately they haven't posted that address change anywhere. So we didn't find that out until FedEx told us that you weren't where we thought you were. So my apologies for that. We got it there as quickly as we could.
I appreciate it.
And I guess back to, I think, what is your main point is that I think we are seeing the revenue to you increase. So in between 2000, well, first of all, and I know you weren't on board at the time, but in 2010, the TSFA had a role in the production of the Tennessee State Fair, but we were not really producing the fair. At that time, North American Midway Entertainment leased the fairgrounds, and they came to us, our group, which didn't really even exist at the time, and said, would you be willing to help put together the creative arts and agricultural elements of the fair? And so that's why you see the very modest beginning that you do. And so in 2010, we were kind of there as subcontractors, if you will, and it wasn't our show, and it was a deal between the Metro Board and North American Midway. And but then in 2011, we did operate the fair, and so we went from the 2011 rental of $62,000 to total proceeds to you to the Metro Board of $107,000 in 2012. So that's about a 72% increase, which is a far greater increase than the total revenue of the fair. And then just kind of roughly thinking about what we anticipate the rental in 2013 will be, we anticipate the total expenses for the fair will go up in the 5 to 10% range. But the rental fee to the Metro Board net will go up around 60 to 70% in 2013 under the lease agreement that we agreed to back in February. So I hope.
Clarification, just
Yeah.
Chairman Burr.
What you estimate the number is to the board. I know the percentage, but
And it's I'll have to admit I've slept since then, but I did that calculation based on about 170 to 175,000 in total rent, which I think is the number that we had kind of spec'd out if under the terms that we agreed to. It could be much higher, incidentally, obviously, if attendance at the 2013 fair increases more than, well, that's based on no increase in attendance. If there is a 10 or 12% increase in attendance, then that number will go up. I think we estimated around 200,000 in total rent if the attendance number goes up at the same rate that it has in the past. So I hope to answer your question there. I think it has increased. It has increased fairly dramatically, in fact, and will increase this year, we believe, at a much faster pace than the overall expenses of the fair have increased. And I do want to say one more thing, which just to reiterate in the letter that I sent to the Metro board members. I mean, we recognize the dilemma that you face, and we appreciate that. And so we understand that you have to figure out a way to enhance the revenues that the fairgrounds is generating, and so we hope that you will balance that with the opportunity to keep the fair as a volunteer fair, as a nonprofit fair, and we appreciate the indulgence that you've provided over the last 3 years on that front, and we hope that you will stay involved with us in helping to build the kind of fair that our citizenry can be proud of. And so I hope that demonstrates that commitment. Now, I know sometimes, Commissioner Clemens, it's my job to get the best deal I can. It's your job to get the best deal you can. And so I hope we all appreciate that. And so we can put on a better fair if we shepherd our resources as carefully as we can. And in the end, the public judges us on how entertaining the fair is. So I hope you appreciate that.
Mr. Clemens?
I'm sure Mr. Cheek and all the other attorneys in the room appreciate that we don't like to negotiate blindly. So the disclosure of these financials is certainly helpful, and we appreciate that. We are in a unique position. And in your letter references us, recommitting to the Tennessee State Fair. I don't think any recommitting is required of our board. Everybody with whom I've served over the past couple of years in my short tenure has remained committed at all times. So, to that extent, we have the State Fair as one entity, and then we have the larger Fairgrounds and Expo Center as an even larger entity on which we're focused. So with that, I just want to, make that clarification. I appreciate that you understand the unique position in which we find ourselves. And again, we do appreciate each other and the unique positions that we have in negotiations. So thank you.
Vice Chair Suey.
I just want to, first of all, thank you all for being here as well. We've tried to come together as two boards for several months now, so to see the culmination of this, I think, is a great positive step forward. I also want to echo Commissioner Clemens' point, and that there is no contention between our boards. The issue, however, the debates, is that unique scenario that he alluded to that we find ourselves in, which is how we've come to sit together today. And I want to just take a second and kind of talk about what that is. Our board and our organization has been operating from reserve funds for years. And so we completely understand that your board has a responsibility to be fiscally sound, as does ours. Now, we've been in a position where we've been able to utilize those reserve funds, but those funds are disappearing quickly. And we know that here, probably in a matter of months, it'll be completely depleted. And we look at our cost for the fair, and we've estimated that our cost, just our operating cost, to do this is about $300,000 for the 10 days or 3 weeks that we actually have the doors open for the state fair. And so even with a significant increase from 60,000 to 67,000 to perhaps 200,000, if the attendance increases, it still leaves us 100 grand in the hole. So we've worked hard to try to find out how can we at least, and I believe that there was legislation acted upon at the council level several years ago that we had to get clarification on that said that we basically could not operate in the hole, and certainly we have a challenge now to try to stop the bleeding, if you will. And so part of the reason for the financial disclosure that we've been trying to obtain is so that we are not asking for what is unrealistic, number one, but also so that we can try to be fair to ourselves and to the taxpayers of Davidson County, so that we don't run into a situation where the fair is over, the fairgrounds is closed because the reserve fund is depleted and there's no more money being put into it. So that's kind of the catch-22 that we find ourselves in.
But now, there were several heads shaking on that. First off, were you finished?
Yes.
Okay. And that was more statement-oriented,
That was a statement.
Okay. And there were several people that were shaking their heads, but let's just continue on with the list. Mr. Byrd?
Yeah, well, again, Mr. Byrd with the Metro Fair Board, I would reiterate what my fellow commissioners just said about our unique situation, and we're all facing that. I think we all know that. And I think even Board Member Sewing said, 300,000. I think we estimated even at the most conservative, it's down to 200 and maybe up as much as 400,000 in costs to us, depending on how you determine those. So I think 300 is a fair number to say kind of where we assume that is. And, in my looking at the financials, and one reason I'm actually very proud of the deal that we struck with you this year, I made the motion to approve it. I made a motion to actually approve a longer-term lease with the TSFA. One of the reasons I'm proud of it is that I notice if we get the estimated $175,000 to us this year, and I look at your 2012 number where your total profit was $166,000, we're gobbling up most of your profit if that pans out. Compared to 2012. Not all of it, because I guess you would add the fee that you had to pay us in 2012 too, but we do gobble up a good bit of that. And so I appreciate the deal. I think it's a good deal for us as far as what's coming in. But I agree, I think where we need to start working is we're still not hitting our costs. And when we see that you have grant money and that we want to talk about a future, a 5-year, I know you're talking about longer-term leases with the State Commission and things like that. We need some help to understand that somebody's going to put some skin in the game for capital improvements on the property, for long-term improvements, so that our costs, we just can't keep eating those costs. And I think we need, I appreciate the deal we've got on sort of what comes in as far as ticket prices and what we're getting out of this. I like that deal. I appreciate it. That's why I supported it. And I understand we can't keep bleeding a turnip, but what we need to talk about is something more long-term and more future about capital improvements so that we're not sucking up all our costs. And I think that's where we were trying to start talking about some of the grant money and other money where we can think about how to do that. But I appreciate these financials, and I don't really have a question as much as I was clarifying those numbers, and I think the 175 is about right, and I appreciate that increase.
And unless you want to respond, one thing I would like to point out to members, after, if you'll look down at, if my Roman numerals are accurate, items 8 and 9, we will have an opportunity to hope to continue this discussion if we could move on. Now, I'll go back to the list. If we can go back on the financials, Mr. Cheek.
I was going to follow up on the expenses. Can someone explain what the expenses are? Because we don't really have an idea of what the $200,000 to $400,000. Is that generally just maintenance of buildings and
this would be
electricity?
And will y'all have that in your presentation in the next?
We have Laura Faust here.
He's asking what are their costs.
Right. If you don't mind,
for one thing, you can look at it a number of different ways. It costs $3 million to run the facility. Divide that up by the weekends, the average weekends that we are sold out. So the fair takes up not just the 10 days, but there's setup time. So there's really 3 weeks there that we cannot, there's opportunity costs involved there. So any way you slice it, we have ongoing, and the budget's been trimmed and trimmed and trimmed as much as it can be. And obviously the buildings are none the better for the lack of capital improvements, and we're just kind of left there twisting in the wind a little bit. So you can slice it any way we want, as Mr. Byrd was saying. It costs us, $50,000 a weekend easily, just in opportunity costs, much less staffing and ongoing operating of the entire facility. So,
I need one clarification. How many weeks or weekends would you assume that the fairgrounds are occupied with occupants?
It's just about every weekend there's something there.
Okay, so I have that figure, $57,700 approximately. And you would assume that amount of revenue or opportunity costs can be assessed for what period of time?
That's just one way to slice it. I mean, Laura has given us 6 ways to look at it. At the very least, it's $200,000. At the most, it could be double that. We've been over this many times in our board meetings. But.
Let me get back just for a second, and I saw you, Mr. Byrd, for clarification on this. Did that answer your question?
I was headed to say, if there are expenses that are specific to the fair, we would love to talk to you all and see if there's ways that we can manage those, by doing things differently. Because we have a large volunteer base, and so we may be able to staff things differently. If there are ways that we can help, please let us know so you can bring that cost down. I
think we put together. We worked. Several of us worked hard on putting together the plan as it sits, so that there's some. We're working together to get, as the attendance goes up. There's some reward for both entities. Skin in the game, however you want to call it. So I think we worked hard on that, and we shifted the parking responsibilities over to the other side of the ledger, and there was a lot of back and forth working towards that end, I think, and that's what we have in front of us. And so what we're talking about is a one-year contract. It'd be nice to have that longer, but as we sit here today, we don't know what our future is. There's a lot of different factors playing into the future of our facility. So I think this is the best case scenario. I wish we'd gotten this done in last October or in January, but here we are. And it looks like we're on the verge of getting this thing signed and official and in the books. And hopefully it's a model for a longer-term collaborative process where everybody's, singing from the same hymn book here and working together to have a great state fair and at the facility that we're at now. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chief, did that satisfy?
Yes.
I had a list. Representative Holt was on the list next, and then Mr. Byrd. Mr. Byrd, were you wanting to clarify something that was stated?
Answer Mr. Chief's question to some degree.
Okay.
I think we have, and maybe we can provide. I know I've seen that we have a spreadsheet of sorts where we try to come up with the different ways to calculate that cost. I don't have it in my hand right here, but I'd be fine. I think we can work together with Mr. Dozier and the staff to pull that together, where we calculated the different costs. Since why I recall the $300,000 as being a very fair number, kind of different ways we calculated it. But it includes things like paying for water and space and time and what we would rent and the staff. And we had it line by line. And there's different ways to look at that, because sometimes we're going to have some of those costs anyway, sometimes we're not. But I do have a spreadsheet that we could go over with you, or the staff can go over with you if necessary down the road. I know a lot of our big costs that come broadly, not just in that 2 or 3 week period, but over time, are the capital improvements that we have to do to the facility, where we're not, a lot of the improvements to help go towards what you all are doing at the State Fair.
Thank you.
I'll put you on the list. Representative Holt.
I'll defer to item
Item 8, okay. Next on the list, Mr. Byrd, I think you may have. Yes, ma'am, and I'm
Deborah
Varallo. Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
I would like to address Mr. Byrd's question. I'm just curious as to the capital expenditures, as to what you're planning to do with the fair property, because it would help us to know kind of what we can do and plan. You talked about ongoing capital expenses. What are those that you're planning to do?
And that was addressed to Mr. Byrd?
Yes, but I guess it would have to go to the fair property.
Mr. Byrd?
Well, at least for purposes of this discussion, I think what we had talked about was we ought to talk about improvements that we can make that not only help our facilities long-term, but that would also go to things that would help put on the state fair. And there are things that we can sit down together and do and come up with. I think because we're trying to negotiate a concept where some of the grant money or some money somehow gets released to us for future use for improving the property. You know, if you couldn't do any more to us on the rental side, could you do something that would show commitment to be here long-term, and we could be here long-term? Of course, that's a little bit up in the air. Our hands are a little bit tied if something happens with that property. But the idea was we would sit down together. To the extent you all could commit to some improvements, we would sit down together and determine what the best use of that, what the best improvements would be. And we, at least how our board works, my understanding is we would have to do that heavily in conjunction with our staff to sit down and see what are the necessary items. And is this something, for example, does this piece of capital improvement that we need to do make sense for something that you all feel would also benefit the state fair, so it makes sense for us to cooperate on?
And this is very valid for item 8. Ms. Varallo?
Varallo, yes. So I'll continue on with that, Mr. Byrd. And that is, I'm just curious because I feel like we all would like to see the property improved so it's better for all activities and events that occur at the fair, so that it brings more people, which in the end brings in more revenue for the Davidson County of the area. So my question is, are you working with the other associations and groups that are participating on the fair property and asking the same of them, like of them working together and seeing how we can work together, the different groups, whatever it may be, the flea market or the races? Is that part of y'all's avenue?
By default, Mr. Byrd?
I do believe we work with everybody, and we also try to work with Metro to the extent to do that. But, the situation we were facing is, we're looking at this 2 or 3 week period of the state fair. You have to, our position, in addition to what we've already discussed in our unique position, was that, legislation got passed to take away any sort of power we had to select who ran the state fair, but we were told that we have to run a state fair. And when we look at the ledgers and realize we're, basically the state is forcing us to do something that we can't even cover the costs in, and we have all these improvements we need to make, that's where the discussion started happening, at least as far as the state fair. As far as our other improvements that we need to make, air conditioned units and that type of thing. Right. I think we work with every vendor to try to see what we can do and try to get as much money as we can or that's feasible under the renting of the property. And we also work with Metro. Mr. Dozier probably loves those meetings, having to go over with Metro to see what we can request. But, Metro, I'm sure one of the first things they tell us is to go back and why are you all, cutting deals that make you lose money every time? And we're kind of faced with having to answer those questions.
I can add to this answer.
If we could, I'll put you on the list. Chairman Horton was next, if that satisfies.
That's fine, thank you.
Chairman Horton.
Well, just the Equine Arena is the perfect example, and that's what the discussion originally came up about. And that would be the type of example of a capital improvement that was collaborative, that Scott brought to the table, that could be a benefit to the facility and to the event. So,
and again, we do have items 7 and 8 for this specific point. Mr. Clements.
To answer Ms. Varallo's question, I think to follow up on Commissioner Byrd, I think comparing the way we negotiate with other entities in the state fair is like comparing apples and oranges. The state fair, I think it's fair to say, gets a special rate based on the cost-benefit analysis as to what we charge other people. So we have monthly contracts with the gun show, for instance. They use one facility. They pay the market rate for that facility. We charge, all those costs are built in, the maintenance, the upgrade, that kind of stuff. And when we negotiate with the state fair, it's obviously a different type of scenario. And it's like, Mr. McCord said, it involves a little bit more passion. There's a lot of different things to it. So the negotiations and the way that we approach those may be a little different in that respect, whereas there's this special relationship with the state fair that, where the investments could go that would benefit each of us and protect us all in our interests in those respects a little bit differently.
Mr. James.
Well, I just wanted to make the comment, in my former position, I oversaw the state's fair program all across the state. There's some 65 local fairs operating. Most of those fair organizations were basically able to perpetuate themselves. They did not generate capital development funds. Some of those fairs came to the Department of Agriculture and to the General Assembly and asked for improvements, capital improvements to their fair. We were able to do several across the state a few years ago. So I don't think TSFA is much different than other nonprofit operators of fairs. If we can make our way, if we can build this reserve account, and we can discuss what that ought to be, but we need to achieve that goal before we start talking about major capital development things. There may be an avenue for capital development outside TSFA funding. So.
That completes the list that we had on the TSFA financials. Are there any other questions specifically on the TSFA financials? Chairman Rose, just to wrap up, I think you may have had one other point that you wanted to.
Right. Just would ask the cooperation of the Metro board members and our own board members in maintaining the confidentiality of the is leaving the meeting. And that's it. Thank you.
All right. Moving on to item number 7, State Fair contract approval. Chairman Horton.
Okay. We've received documents and updates and information. We have initialed and signed copy from the TSFA. I understand we're missing some insurance forms, perhaps, but I would like to call on our counsel, if I could. Here somewhere. Oh, Susan.
Hi.
To speak to the latest update.
Okay. I'm Susan Tucker-Jones with the Metropolitan Department of Law. We have been able to get the terms agreed upon that the board requested at the last meeting. There is one remaining item, which is the insurance. The current insurance for workers' compensation is expired, so that will have to be provided before this particular contract is routed through Metro for the required signatures for finance, insurance, and legal, and following with the Metropolitan Clerk. I understand that that may be available today, and if so, we will add that to the contract. The other piece is that there is on the general liability insurance of $5 million, the automobile liability insurance, as well as I think there may be one other component. That piece of it is there is a current policy, so that won't prevent the approval of the contract as of right now. However, what we did last year, because that policy is going to expire at the first of next month, and they will be getting a new contract, a new certificate of insurance at the beginning of next month, so that the contract can continue to route and not be prevented. We're going to add an addendum to the contract, just as we did last year for that same reason. And that addendum basically says that if that is not provided, that the Fair Board is under no obligation under the contract. That was provided in a timely fashion last year. I assume that it will be provided in a timely fashion this year. So those are the remaining issues and the status of those.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I do have the workers' comp certificate with me, and I sent an electronic copy to Ms. Jones and Mr. Cobb. Okay. Mr. Cobb with the insurance department earlier today, but probably after people had gotten on their way here. So they should get electronic copies of that, and I do have a copy of the workers' comp certificate if we need to add that.
Okay.
Right, they just-
Just some quick discussion amongst our board. We'd asked for the financials. We've had a presentation today. We've got some update from our council. Any further questions or discussion?
Yes. The copy of the contract that we received at our last board meeting had a number of potential revisions. Things that were to be deleted, reformatted, added, etc. And the one that we talked about specifically had to do with section 3, item K, which I see is not included in the one that we received today, and that's the issue of parking. How has that been resolved?
What was your notation from?
The $250 per month for parking retro back to when they occupied the space March 1st.
The office rental?
Yeah,
Right.
I'm sorry, office
Yeah,
rental.
yeah.
You're correct, thank you, office rental.
At the last board meeting, the board directed the legal department to contact legal for the TSFA and inform them of the board's decision. At that time, the board moved to require a space lease for the office part of the fairgrounds that is currently, as I understand, being utilized by the TSFA for $250 a month, retroactive to March, and ask that that be executed by tomorrow, I believe is the date. I have drafted a copy. I'll have to yield to fairground staff as to where they are in any implementation or any revisions that they may have to the draft. It has not been shared with TSFA as of today, as I understand it.
So we agreed to remove that from the contract
Yes,
so we can move forward. I remember now. No more
That was
questions.
exactly what the
Okay.
board decided to do.
I
And
recall.
we would pursue that separately. That is
Okay.
in the work.
Thank you.
That's moving along.
I remember now.
Well, I think
Commissioner?
there's been a lot of hard work that's gone into this, and, all my questions have been answered, and I certainly support moving forward.
Well, I for one want to go ahead and finalize the deal. So if you're ready for a motion, I'll move that we execute the contract in its current form.
Second motion.
Okay, we have a motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion about the topic? We ready for a vote?
I'm just wondering about Ms. Jones may be able to answer this, the legality or the propriety of doing this motion and voting while we're still adjourned or while we're still under a joint meeting. Do we have to adjourn as a sole body and then rejoin the meeting, or how does that work?
Because this was advertised and noticed as a special called meeting of the Fair Board, you can go ahead and make a motion if you'd like. We will have to count the votes of our members. Obviously, persons that are not on our board need not participate in the motion or in the vote. To the extent that you can do that, that would be fine, and it should be reflected in our minutes as the special called meeting of the board. So that's no problem. Thank you.
That's a good question.
All right, well, if we're ready for a vote, I'll call for a vote on the motion to move forward with this contract as it is.
Second.
We have a second.
Okay. All
in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so that, we will facilitate that.
Mr. Chairman, they're not allowed to participate in this portion of your meeting.
That's not a vote. So that concludes our item on the agenda here, and we have this contract moving along.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Without objection, we'll go back into joint meeting between the two groups. We're on item 8, and quite a bit of discussion has already occurred surrounding item 8 and item 9. And just because you had yielded until we got to item 8, Representative Holt, you're on the list first, please.
All right, thank you. And Andy Holt, again, just normal guy, farmer, also serves representative with TSFA, excuse me. Do want to point out a couple of things in the conversation we've had today. You all made some good specific suggestions and good specific questions. I've heard you say multiple times that you all are in a unique position, and I want you all to recognize that we understand that and that we find ourselves in a unique situation as well. Any business, or in our case, not-for-profit, that is forced to operate on a year-by-year contract cannot fully exempt itself from the idea of thinking about what could happen. And that's the situation that we find ourselves in. I've only been a part of the board for just the last several months, but in the time that I've been here, I've recognized the restraint, the restriction that this year-by-year contract lends itself. Commissioner Ray, to speak specifically to your question earlier about our willingness to compensate you for improvements on the facilities. I believe if I'm speaking in error, please let me know here, either Julie or John. We did propose that we would give a portion of the proceeds if we were given a multi-year contract to help pay for renovations. That's correct, isn't it? And, that multi-year deal was, from what I understand, turned down. Now we've adopted this another year-by-year contract. And that's put us in a position, again, also to say, well, how big can we grow? How much can we grow in an annual basis with no ongoing premise to allow ourselves to think that we've got this time period, we've got a 3-year, we've got a 5-year period. And I think for me, I've heard several board members or commissioners, also talk about and focus on grants. And we would much rather focus on profitability than on grants. We feel like there's the opportunity for us as a state fair to generate enough revenue that we can compensate ourselves comfortably. And when I say compensate, not direct compensation, but allow us to build a rainy day fund so that we can get in a position if we have catastrophic, terrible weather, whatever the case may be, that we can survive and that we can pay you what is due. But instead of, again, focusing on these grants, which seem like they've been a point of contention because we've held these, they've been designated, let's just make sure that we're, again, focusing on the profitability and not just this idea that we've been given some seed money to get started. And for all practical purposes, that's what I would consider is just seed money. When you start any type of business, not-for-profit, or whatever the case may be. If given a long-term contract, I think that we can deliver results. We've obviously shown, I don't know if you can say exceptional growth, but very steady growth over the last couple of years. And I think we can continue that into the future and continue compensating you all at a higher level each year. So I just want to bring those points forward. And in the spirit of full disclosure, we have given you these, our financials, our audited financials. And those are financials that I'm particularly proud of because we've started with nothing and really made something out of this. When you all give us this estimate of $300,000 is what your direct or indirect costs may be, and Commissioner Byrd, you offered to allow us to look over those with you. And as Mr. Cheek has said earlier, we would be interested in looking at that and seeing if we can help reduce those costs. And if we could at some point request those formally, I'd like to do that and have the opportunity to review those.
Thank you. Mr. Clemens?
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up Representative Holt's statement. I don't want there to be any confusion here. The focus here is on profitability from our standpoint. Commissioner Ray used grants as an example simply because that had come up in our discussion. Profitability is key. And the profitability here is to the TSFA But our interest is wanting to share in that profitability. That's our focus. Whether it's from grant money, whether it's from additional revenues. The whole purpose of this whole meeting and this whole debate that's drawn out this long, unfortunately, was because us wanting to share in that profitability for the long-term success of our fairgrounds.
Mr. Byrd?
Well, trying to stick to the agenda, sometimes 8 and 9 mix here a little bit, but two points on two points on long-term goals. I know Representative is not here. I know you're here on behalf of your position as a board member on the TSFA. But it is, maybe someone can speak to the concept from the legislature, somebody on the state side of things, when they passed this law, how brilliant it was, or we didn't think so brilliant. I don't know how well thought out it was, but certainly we have a question of why the state has decided to take over the state fair, but provide absolutely nothing in terms of providing costs to do that. And so I guess one of the questions I'd pose to you, not as your role in the TSFA as much as, back to the legislature, if the governor and the legislature are so, were so concerned that they needed to pass a law to kind of strip the control of that out from under the Metro Fair Board, where are they in this discussion, and where is their skin in the game, as we've said before, in putting on a state fair? If they think it's so important to strip away from Metro, how come there are no state? I thought that concept of unfunded mandates, but we're basically forced to put on a state fair under the new state law, but with no funds from the state. So that would be one long-term goal I have, is that we're going to need to share some of the costs there as one way to fix some of this problem. Another long-term goal I have is obviously to grow the numbers of people that come to the state fair. And one of the things the board was met with were, competing proposals, or at least one competing proposals that gave us extravagant ideas that they could bring in hundreds of thousands of people to a fair, 100,000 people. And I think we want to start talking about how we start growing numbers to that level and working together to make sure that happens, so that we can say we've hit those kind of numbers that we all want to hit. So I'd put those two questions out there for long-term goals.
Directed at Representative Holt.
Certainly the first one was.
I urge caution in trying to represent the will of the General Assembly as a whole. And no one person can do that, but if you could directly answer the question, Mr. Bird's, Representative Holt.
Well, thank you. And I would say that the idea behind the legislation was not to take or strip control from any entity, but to add resources into this process. And I think that's what we've seen. Now, some would say, obviously, that the control has shifted and that the funding has not been given in an appropriate level. And I think we all recognize that the state right now, as I assume Metro as well, is not really in a position to be doling out huge amounts of resources. Although we do see that designated funds have been given, especially as I referred to previously as seed money. And I think part of the reason why there has not been further funding associated with this change, and granted a change from the legislature, is because there has been so much turmoil associated with the fairgrounds. And because there has been, I think, little consensus on exactly what the idea is in promoting this state fair. For me, what I would hope for us to accomplish is, again, I think, I guess 8 or 9, long-term strategies. I think if there was a long-term strategy set forward that the state felt comfortable with, that the legislature, the General Assembly felt comfortable with, that funding opportunities may arise at that point. Once there was a steady, stable flow and that the control of the fair was stabilized. That's my general assumption. So to say that the authority has been stripped away from Metro Council, I would partially disagree with. I think that resources have been added in to help manage and control the fair. We obviously all have a vested interest in having a state fair. I think we can all agree with that. And it is my role, especially as a person who is interested in agriculture, to make sure that we have a thriving state fair. And when you talk about, I think the second part of your question was, how do we make sure and gain these larger numbers? For me, it all goes back again to a long-term contract. We can't fully implement all the ideas that we have until we have some foundation of the timeline associated with what permissions do we have in a 3 or a 5-year timeline that we can implement so that we can increase attendance, so that we can create new programming, so that we can start to bring in bigger name attractions, concerts, whatever the case may be, to grow our revenues. Not just to grow our revenues, but to grow the reimbursements that will come back to Metro as well.
Mr. Byrd, quick follow-up.
Certainly. You have the floor.
I think there's 3 spokes in this wheel. There's the TSFA, there's the Metro Board, and now there's the state. And they passed a law, they have a new commission. My understanding is they haven't even funded the commission to meet. Those guys can't even, order a bottle of water at their meeting or something. There's no money. So I guess my problem I have with that is I feel very good about the deal we've worked out with the TSFA. And I think the Metro Board has certainly done its share. What I don't understand is the state, which has inserted itself by passing a law and having a new commission to run things, hasn't put anything in. And I guess that's the third, spoke there that I think can contribute a little bit more.
All right, and just to let y'all know, I have a list, Byrd, Gale, Chairman Horton, Clemens, and Sewing. If that's, as you might guess, is not very balanced, so if anybody from the other side wants to interject themselves, I would like to balance it up as much as I can. Ms. Byrd.
Ms. Ray.
I'm sorry.
I haven't hooked up yet.
Well, I had it written down anyway. I had Miss Gale, so that doesn't make sense either. Miss Ray.
Gail Ray, I just wanted to, I couldn't agree with you more, Representative Holt. I think the people, the staff of the fairgrounds, and we face the same problem. Everybody who leases space, our long-term people, need longer windows to plan and to raise funds and to get more vendors, et cetera, et cetera. We wish we could do that, and we have a couple of Metro Council members here, so they're hearing this, and that responsibility, does not lie with us, unfortunately. We wish we could plan longer. We don't have the ability to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. In an effort to try to balance Ms. Bowling.
Well, my comment is to the long-term nature. One of the reasons we have been successful the last few years is a large number of volunteers. We have people work gates and do all kinds of things that aren't getting paid any money or are getting paid a very small amount for the amount of hours they put in. And I have heard our board say a lot of times we would love to be able to put more into the facility, but all these volunteers giving their time, they don't want to see money go into a facility and us not get to use it. That, I think, is a big concern. When we have all these people coming and giving their time to help us, we want to make sure that that facility will be available to us in the future if we're going to make improvements to it and use some of the funds that we've gained because we have volunteers who aren't getting paid. We would love to see something long-term so we could do that. We could put some money into the facility, and then our volunteers can see, hey, this is what we've done. We've helped improve Davidson County. We've helped improve Nashville. We've improved this facility, and we've kept the fair here for even more than 107 years.
Chairman Horton.
No, I just wanted to point out that I think Mr. Rose has acknowledged this at certain points as well, that our board and our staff are, in essence, have been a stakeholder in getting the TSFA off the ground. And the fact that you do have some reserves, we've helped keep things going as well, a big leap of faith. And, we crafted this document that we approved today to try to move things forward in a mutually beneficial way. So history is the history. It's been, a lot of surprises for different parties here, a lot of different parties involved. But we are a stakeholder, not only in the state fair, but in your organization, and we've we want to just get beyond that and move forward in a positive way. So the fact that there is some funding here, I think we had a hand in that. And now we just have to get to a place where there's some good balance and everybody's in agreement that, we're not fighting over what happened yesterday. We want to make the plans for tomorrow. So.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Cheek.
I can't speak for our board because we haven't specifically voted on this, but I think several of us would be very interested in a long-term contract where we make some specific investments in the fairgrounds. We understand that contract would be subject to your all's existence. If you guys go out of business, the contract terminates, and there wouldn't be an obligation. It's a leap of faith for both the Fair Board and for both boards to continue operating, because I understand that if Metro doesn't fund the deficit or you guys don't bring your budget in line, at some point you shut the lights out and the fairgrounds go dark. We all realize that, and I think we're willing to work with you and invest money in the fairgrounds knowing that that's a possibility. But in order to make us more comfortable to do so, we'd really like the long-term contract. And that's what I was thinking about.
Thank you. Mr. Clemens?
Yeah, this speaks to Mr. Cheek and Ms. Boland's comments. I realize that a long-term contract would benefit everyone, I think, for the long term of the fair. And I think we all agree on that. We all know our limitations. We all have different opinions about our limitations. However, just as volunteers don't want to put all their money into something that's going to, possibly go dark in a year or so, we can't continue to agree and tie ourselves to long-term contracts without the guarantee, without knowing that we're going to get the most money possible on the party with whom we're contracting. And that's kind of where we're coming at this, and that's why we're in a little bit of a catch-22, I think, is, y'all don't want to invest because of X, and we're concerned about entering into a long-term contract because we want to make sure, and we have to make sure, that we get the most money possible out of the contract year after year. And of course, that doesn't roll it out, but what we're looking to do is keep from sending Director Dozier up to the Metro Council every year on bid the knee, asking for more money, and then we have to answer the question, well, how come you're not getting the most money possible out of your contracts? So, that's a big concern of ours. And you speak to volunteers, and volunteers are key for the long-term future of any fair. I'm from Wilson County. You want to talk about volunteers? Volunteers drive that fair. People compete to be a volunteer for that fair. And I will follow that up by saying, also being from Wilson County, we have a word when you appoint two governmental bodies to do the same job, but I'm not going to use it here on public record. Commissioner Byrd already discussed that point, so I'll let it go.
Thank you. I think that is a perfect segue into the next item. We're not quite there. We still have two people on the list. Mr. Sewing.
Mostly what I have to say now is going to be an echo. And I'm encouraged that everyone at the table is talking about the advantages of a long-term contract. And for one, I've been on this board now for, seems like, a decade. And I can't remember one meeting where we weren't talking about negotiating a contract for the state fair, once we stopped doing it in-house. We talk about it months leading up to it. We talk about it months afterwards. We start planning. It takes a year to get the contract done. So I, for one, am fully supportive of a long-term contract. And you said the word earlier, Representative Holt, it's about profitability. And we want to get to the point where we can execute into a win-win contract that's profitable on both sides. And while the proposal that was delivered a few months ago represented more revenues than we've received, it represented an opportunity to receive additional funds, I believe, based on growth. At that point, based on what we perceived our cost to be, it still didn't get us to profitability. So while that was rejected, it wasn't rejected for the sake of not wanting a long-term contract. It was just not a contract that, in our minds, was going to get us towards that profitability that you discussed. So I'm on board for longevity. That'd be great.
Mr. Sewing, it's not my place to interject my opinion in debate, but one question begs to be answered, and I guess I have to ask it to you since I don't know who to go to. What constitutes a long-term contract?
That's subjective.
I think y'all need to clearly, have these been annual contracts, never been multi-year?
A long-term agreement by today's standard would be more than 1 year.
And that's pretty high midpoint contract. Thank you, sir. Ms. Varala.
Yes, I have 3 goals for strategies for working together on number 9, please. That would be that we invite...
Ma'am, if I could interrupt
are we
you
not
just
on
a
9
second.
yet?
We're still on long-term goals, and
this
we'll
is
come to
partly
you.
long-term.
Let's just complete this order and move on to the next, and we'll get straight to you. Before we go off long-term goals, are there any members participating by phone that would like to make any comments on those? And if not, now we'll go on to long-term and strategies that all go together. And Ms. Varallo, am I saying that correct? Varallo. I'm so sorry.
Here's what I would like.
I'm sorry. We did have an input from the phone. If there would be, if you could hear me, please just speak up.
Maybe not.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Heavy breathing. No.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What I would like to offer for strategies for working together is that we invite all the commissioners to come join us at the fair and to be with us and visit the fair and to make recommendations while you're there as to how to make it a better fair. I mean, really to be there, to go visit the different venues, to check out the different days, and come back with a list of items. Then I would like to see that we definitely schedule a meeting in October, so after the fair in September, that we gather with fresh minds and come up with great ideas, and we strategize as to how to make this an ongoing working relationship. That's all I have.
Thank you. Very precise. Yes, sir, Mr. Byrd.
Well, it goes to the strategies for working together. Mr. Cheek, I also think we could do a long-term contract. I think that's something we ought to look at with the idea of, we have to be concerned about our own profitability, but I think we can do that with caveats of we don't know, we have some outs that say, look, in case something happens for Metro and the property's gone or the board's over. And likewise, you're going to need some outs. You all are going to need some outs, depending on what the State Commission does. I don't know how it selects each year, and I think they're thinking about doing a long-term, but it'll help us to do a long-term contract to the extent, whatever decision they make, because we have to deal with, presumably, if we're going to put on the state fair anyway, we have to deal with whoever the State Commission chooses. So I think we both have some limitations in that regard, but I think it would, I supported the 3-year deal earlier, and I totally respect the board members who made good points to say, well, maybe we'll get there later, but this isn't the right time because we have to be concerned about our own profitability. So I think it's something we want to keep discussing.
Mr. Holt, Representative Holt.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Byrd, for your comments. We definitely think that there is the opportunity for us to have a long-term contract that does take in, as Mr. Cheek said earlier, the chances that something will go awry. And to address Mr. Clemens, Commissioner Clemens, I think, again, I can't speak for the board. We'll have discussions about this after the meeting, but I could almost guarantee that the board would be willing to bind themselves into a position where we would contribute toward the renovation of structures on site if we were given a 3-year contract. So, again, just to have that on record, I'm not speaking for the board, but I'm presuming that we would more than likely be interested and be willing to compensate the structures, renovation, whatever the case may be, on a long-term basis if we were given a long-term contract. So we talk about the chicken and the egg, who goes first. I'm a believer that the chicken came first, but that's not an argument for here. But if we can get that contract in hand.
Actually, it is. Einstein said the chicken because actuality precedes and exceeds potential.
Wow, there you go. I'll close on that thought.
Mr. Byrd?
As far as strategies, I do have a question of how we continue to talk and work together. I mean, this is a one-time meeting that we're having, but I think it has been a little bit, we have to notice our meetings, and we have to have a, notice to everyone, and we sit down and we try to coordinate these things, and then we don't really have a way to coordinate a meeting with you all unless unless we go through something like this to get here, which took 3 months, I think, to do. So I guess I would open it up a little bit to see, you know, how do we continue best to communicate if we do want to work on things like improving the fair so we get more numbers and that type of thing, how we do that together.
Mr. McCord, this is Emily Petcock. I'm on the phone. May I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
I think that both boards need to work together as a team. I think we need to realize that we're both on the same team with the same goals. As any business, profitability is what we're looking for too, but the same thing, we're looking at educating our young children who are coming up to what it's all about as far as agriculture and to keep agriculture alive in our state, because that's the number one industry that we have. But I think the main thing is for us all to work together as a team, and there may be times that you disagree, but you can always work those things out to try to make sure that that it is in the best interest of what's for our young children coming up. I represent 60 fairs in the state of Tennessee. They're all volunteered except one or two, the larger fairs. And that is their goal, is to educate our young people about what's going on with where milk comes from. You'd be surprised how many children think chocolate milk comes from chocolate cows. But I do think that the key is that we all need to be on the same team together, working for the same goals, and that's to have a Tennessee State Fair.
Thank you, ma'am. And further comments, Representative Holt?
To address Commissioner Byrd, I think that probably a quarterly meeting between our boards on an annual basis would be probably more than enough opportunity for us to converse, and maybe those aren't mapped out every 3 months, but I'd say that 3 to 4 meetings a year like this would give us the opportunity, especially if we do a pre-meeting, pre-fair, and a post-meeting, as was alluded to by Ms. Varello. I think that would be optimal for us, and then somewhere along the way, maybe a meeting specific to the contract itself. Hopefully we can do that once and then not to do it for 3 or 4 or 5 years. But I think you're on the right track, and in the same way that I'm thinking, this is a productive way for us to communicate with one another instead of communicating through the media or the haphazard email here or there. To sit down face to face seems to be a much better mode of communication.
Thank you, Ms. Wright.
Oh, I'm just sort of thinking out loud, I guess. I was thinking about your comment, Mr. Gaines, about how some counties have been able to come to the legislature to get some funding for their facilities because they're not in it to make that kind of money for capital improvements. So I was just mulling over, who the appropriate entity. I think that's a little bit of our issue, is that, we're a different animal here. We're not. It's two different entities that are involved with this, and so that could be a strategy, I think, of working together with how to. And even we, as a fair board, I'm not even sure that we could do that versus the mayor, the Metro Council. I'm just, that's all a little bit of a question, but it would be great if we could come up with a strategy to do that instead of just kind of having it hanging out there.
Thank you. Mr. Clemens?
No. Yeah, I just, this whole concept of strategies for working together, it's just, for us to have quarterly meetings would be fantastic, but, there's always going to be a third party missing, and that's the state board or the state commission. So, unless everybody's at the table together, we can work together all we want, but they're going to have to make a decision, and then we're going to have to make a decision whether or not to lease with whom they made a decision to contract with. So unless everybody's on the same page, I don't think this wheel's going to turn. So I would like to add to that we need to have the third party
present at these meetings as well to make sure everybody's on the same page.
I agree.
To make sure that, we're all pulling the oar in the same direction. And there's a lot of legal arguments which way or another and jurisdiction over this or that. But a lot of that can be hammered out and avoided, hopefully, and save our lawyers a lot of work if we're all working together from the get-go. So for long-term work strategies for working together, I'd say it'd be to get all three parties on the same page and at the same meetings.
Do you feel it's necessary, just for clarification, that the three boards be present at the three meetings, all three of those?
I think if we're going to have any meetings, that everybody needs to be present at those meetings, however often everybody decides they are. I don't know if quarterly is necessary. I'm fine with that, but it's pointless to have 2 out of 3 parties at a meeting and guess what else is going to happen. So that's all I would add.
Thank you. Chairman Rose.
I guess as I hear this discussion, I'm reminded of the history, and it's easy to read history sometimes and not fully appreciate what happened, what probably happened beyond what got written down. But obviously, from 1906 up through the mid to late 20s, this issue was in a constant state of turmoil back then. And I hope that it doesn't take, somebody do the math, 15 or 20 years this time to solve it. As we know, ultimately, there was a structure that emerged, and then the fair ran for 100 years, thereabouts, or 80 years, I guess, by the time they got it all resolved. So as painful as it is sometimes, this is part of that process. I know we have elected representatives here, and it's sometimes messy and painful, but maybe it's the best way to settle issues is to have these discussions. So I do think that, to second what Commissioner Clemens has just said, that getting everyone at the table is a good way to start figuring this out. I point out that unfortunately we probably are still not going to have 2 groups at the table, and that is the Metro Council and the Tennessee General Assembly, and I'm not sure that even the 3 that we're thinking of can solve it without the other 2 ultimately, but we might create the atmosphere wherein the Council and the Assembly could see the path and could facilitate, our work to its completion. And so I think we should try.
Now that we've gone into creationism, we should all just pray that they work it out and give us a little guidance.
Point of clarity, that was the egg, actually, because potentiality precedes and exceeds actuality. I was backwards on that.
Hey, with that, I'd move to adjourn.
Before we adjourn, what is the status?
Well, if we could just finish. Mr. Rose had the floor, and we'll come back to you, and then we'll have the 2 chairmen close it out if there's no other questions.
So I hope that we can bring all 3 groups together and that we can continue this discussion, because I'm convinced. I've been to our meetings and I've been to your meetings, and this has probably been the most cordial and productive meeting that I've been to, and so I think that if we can do more of this, we're likely to come up with a solution that will serve our respective groups and ultimately serve the people of Tennessee and Davidson County, which I know is what we all want to do. So I thank everyone who's here today participating, and I hope that we can work together. It did take some doing, and I want to thank Chairman Horton for his cooperation over the past week or 2 as we've put this together, and he's been very accommodating, easy to work with, and assisted in all ways. So I appreciate his efforts in helping make this happen, and many others who also brought us together. I am convinced that we need a state fair in Tennessee, and that we can have a state fair that is something that Tennesseans can look to and not take a second seat or back seat to anyone in the country. I'm convinced we can do that at the Tennessee State Fairgrounds. And it won't be just like everyone else's fair around the country. It'll be Nashville's fair and Tennessee's fair, and I think that's what we ought to work to do, and I commit myself to help do that, and I hope that we can find a way to work through the difficulties that exist and get there, and I commit myself to that, and I thank you all for being here to help make that happen today.
Mr. Byrd?
Yeah, not to open a can of worms, I just want to know what the status of the state commission's, the state commission, I guess, is now working on the next year, or next several years, and I wanted to know, does anybody know what the status of what the state commission's doing as far as the following years?
Mr. Gaines?
Okay. The commission at its last meeting authorized staff of the Department of Ag and the Department of General Services to work to put together an RFP. And that effort has begun. I don't know the exact status of it. The original intent was to have something in place around the time of the fair so that some decisions could be made expeditiously about the next operator of the fair.
Mr. Byrd,
are they looking at a long-term? Do we know one way or the other whether they're doing a 1 year or a long-term?
The conversation at the commission meeting leads me to say yes, it's a multi-term award that they want to do, but that decision will be up to them.
All right, thank you. Further comments, that completes the list that I had. Was going to turn it over to the two chairmen to close out. I personally would like to say thank you. This has not been what I expected. It's been much more civil and I think productive than I expected. I wore all this armor plating on and I'm hot because underneath it. But I certainly appreciate everything. And Mr. Chairman Rose and then Mr. Chairman Horton. Thank you.
All right, if there's no other business to be presented, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion from Will Cheek, second from Deb Barallo. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All members of the TSFA board in favor of adjourning, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously. We stand adjourned.
Okay. Looking to our board for a motion.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.